So, welcome everybody. Originally, this was going to just be a test thing, because we're, we said we'd start on the 3rd of June with Sharon Carnegie, who I consider to be the world's expert on Stanislavski, and she's the person I go to when I say, I wonder what Stanislavski would have said. But then we sort of were working on it, and Walker and I were working on it this week. And I thought, you know what? All the questions that we get from the podcast have to do with actors asking questions about things like auditioning, things like how do you work. And so we decided that our first episode would, in fact, be with Chris Petrovski, because he's sort of a working actor who's in the trenches and auditioning and putting up with everything. So thank you, Chris, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
A little bit about Chris, because I think it's sort of important that Chris arrived in America with nothing but kind of a germ of a talent, and the worst accent you've ever heard. It was the worst New Zealand. You could not understand him speaking English. And he slugged it out and slugged it out and slugged it out in drama school. And he worked on it, worked on it, worked on it. And then about 4.5 years later, on a self-tape, he sent in a self-tape to the casting director for Madam Secretary. Now, the interesting thing is, and I love the whole kind of story, is that the agent he had lied to in order to become part of the agency. He said that an actress he'd worked with on a film, who in fact didn't remember him at all, had suggested he get in touch. And so she'd had a one-line part on Madam Secretary, which meant they'd look at his audition. Anyway, so he got cast, and the promise was for 1 to 3 episodes. He ended up doing 29. In fact, at one point, they killed him off, and the hue and cry from the audience was so intense that it brought him back. He hadn't died after all. He was in prison in the Gulag. Anyway, but I think what's really interesting about it is, even after doing 29 episodes of Madam Secretary, he became aware that, yes, this is just a step in the work. Now it's like it doesn't mean I'm going to have a career. And I think the fact that he just keeps working at it and working at it and working at it. In Madam Secretary, he played a Russian. For a while, he could only get Russian auditions. In fact, we lied. They said you had to be fluent in Russian, and he said he was, and he wasn't. Anyway, I think he is the result of all sorts of actor tricks and actor just journey. But one of the questions that we get a lot is, do you have that question from James Hamilton, Walker?
Yes, I do. He said, in so many words, he's gotten a lot of technical direction that has to do with the camera. Things like look towards the camera always so they can see you, or play smaller. You know, these are such common questions we get all the time. And it's confusing, because there will always be technical aspects of the work, whether you're on, film or on stage. So I guess, Chris, if you could talk a little bit about how you work with technical direction, and are you able to integrate it into, your reality, so it's somehow part of the circumstances, or is it just technical?
It's both. It's living the truth of the circumstance, and it's being aware of what your face is doing in certain technical things. Because you can't play the scene, but also play it out to nowhere, where the camera's not picking it up.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, the biggest shift for me when that happened, and when I was able to combine the two, was when I started this web series called In the Moment. And originally it was just kind of fun little sketches that a friend and I would do, and would write them, would direct them, I'd learn how to edit, and we put it all together. And that made me become aware of every aspect of acting, especially the technical aspect. And so I realized I was always able to commit to the circumstance, but I wasn't aware of certain things that my face and my mouth was doing. Like anytime I was listening, it's like I had this gaping kind of mouth open, and I just wasn't aware of it. I wasn't aware that I wasn't filling all these moments. I was just kind of listening. And they say, listen. Well, what do you mean by listen? Well, it has to be like active listening. It has to register what is going on when you are listening. So certain technical things like this were interesting for me to figure out. So in answer to your question, I would say start writing, start shooting your own stuff, and figure out what it is that you are selling. And that in turn will teach you how to work the camera, but also stay in the circumstance of whatever it is you're doing. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes. I think it's a good time to bring up the experience you had with the callback audition. I think it was for NCIS, where you were on Zoom, a room full of actors, all who had been called back, and what you realized from watching everyone else.
Yeah, it's really a bizarre thing, the day and age we live in now, where these first round of auditions or even callbacks sometimes are just via Zoom. So getting used to that as opposed to which was in the room, is a totally different thing. They used to say, you can kind of go in the audition and feel out the room. Well, you can't really feel it out in a Zoom call because people can hide their faces. You're not in a room. Whoever's talking is only popping up. So it's a very weird thing. But when you first log in, right, you get to see a lot of the actors that haven't turned off their cameras, or when they first log in, and you see how nervous they are. You get to see how aware of the camera and their space they are. You get to see what kind of questions they ask. Like, is it okay if my reader reads instead of with me during the scene, instead of, whoever the casting director is? And
the answer to that question is
and
what?
the answer to that was no. You're going to read with our reader. Okay. Some people have huge setups and props and all kinds of things, and other people just have like a canvas behind me, like I do, which I think is probably the best. That way people aren't fixated on all these different props and things that you have, as they're fixated on you, which is what makes it totally different than an on-set experience. Anyway, we can get into that later. But yeah, just really interesting to see what they ask for and how much of a sense you can't get in a Zoom audition. You just kind of have to do it and take command the same way you would in the room, and know what your intention is, not just with the scene, but what your intention is going into the audition. Okay, I'm going to do scene two first, and then I'll do scene one because it's standing, and then I'll be able to adjust the tripod for scene one and have it lower because it'll just be an easier setup. They're trying to get through as many actors as they can very quickly. It's now very easy for casting directors and everyone to see whoever they want to see via Zoom. So as a result, they want to move fast and just get done with the day. So you just kind of have to have a game plan going into these auditions as to, okay, I'll do this scene first, I'll do it like this, I'll have the setup, and just really kind of figure it out. Because a lot of actors, when I first saw them, that were asking questions like, "Is this okay? Is this good?" They don't want to see any worries. They don't want to have to tell you what to do. Just be set up and ready to go. Um, and also, don't leave the audition the same way you would in an in-person audition, not having given it what you want to give it. Don't just cut it short because you know that they are trying to end this audition and move on to the next person. I will say, was that everything you wanted to see? Or if they give me an adjustment, I might say, and I'm not too sure about what it is that they want, because casting directors and actors always kind of have a miscommunication about language because they don't kind of speak in actor terms with an actor vocabulary.
Yep.
So a good tip or trick that I like to do when I'm in either in-person room or virtual, and if they give me an adjustment, but I'm confused about it, is I'll say something like, "Okay, you want him." They'll say, "Chris, we want him, more upset than what you're doing." Kind of a result-oriented thing. It's like, okay, more upset. Do you mean like this? And then I'll give them a quick demo of whatever the line is, and then they'll either say yes or more, or so it's a tricky way of doing the scene without doing the scene, because you could do the scene and get it wrong, and then they say, "Okay, well, thank you very much. We're going to send your tape over to the producer." But sometimes I like to say, before we even start the second take or whatever it is that they want me to do, I'll say, "Well, do you mean like this?" And I'll give them a little demo, and they say, "That's exactly right." And so now I know, going into the scene, where on the level of upset they want it, because oftentimes they don't even know. But you just kind of...
And how to translate that for yourself.
Yeah, and how to translate that for yourself, because it's such a brief moment that you have with them that you really just kind of have to figure out very quickly what it is that they want. And that's a good barometer, if you will, of figuring out where on the level of upset, or what it is that they mean, trying to find a common ground, a common language in that, if that makes sense.
I'm very, very big about helping actors when they're given an effect direction, which is what we call that. I want you to be more upset. So then you say, "Oh yes, I can play more upset." How have you worked out? How do you avoid playing a cliche of upset?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. You try to, I think, figure out what the nature of upset is. Or so, an example, I had an audition for the Rookie Feds, which I ended up getting earlier in the year, and the description of the character was gullible. And so I knew that, I can't play gullible. I can't play, "Oh, hey, let me just believe everything you say because I'm gullible," which is, again, a result-oriented kind of direction. The same way upset. Well, if someone says play upset, I'm going to be upset, really upset. So I'm always trying to figure out what the nature of it is. Well, okay, so what was the nature of gullible? And that was kind of, this guy loves every idea that's thrown at him, and he believes it with such enthusiasm because he's so excited to follow along, and that's something that they pointed out that they liked when I finally got there. They said, "Oh, we love the way you play gullible. Not a lot of actors played it the way you played it." And I was like, "Oh, interesting. I wonder how they played it." And I think they probably played it like, "Well, I'm gullible."
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a brilliant choice. I'm stunned by that choice, but I think that what I know about actors, there are things that you do that you don't know what you're doing technically. And so for anybody listening, I will tell you what he's doing is finding an action. And that is how you take, an effect direction like gullible, and say, for Chris, and there's so many technique things you can use. For Chris, finding what the nature of something is helps him just explore it. But at the same time, what he came up with was a playable action to love everything. And I think if you're doing upset, it's exactly the same thing. What is the nature of upset? And so when you come up with a playable action, it's much better. You can play a cliche of upset, certainly. But on the other hand, if you come up with a playable action that something like to reject everything, it's more playable. And then it takes you out of playing an effect.
What I do less of now, but I used to do a lot of, was when I couldn't figure out what that was, I would talk it out, and I would say, all right, well, I'd almost say the other person's lines out loud, and then talk around how that made me feel. Well, you're telling me that you don't want me to put the coffee on the table, but this table's mine. You're in my space. So if you don't like it, I mean, there's the door. And that kind of talking out for me early on, and even now sometimes if I get lost with it, is a good road in, a good way of kind of finding what the nature of it is. And you don't even necessarily need to say, okay, this is the nature of it, name it. It's not analytical. You don't need to answer the questions on the exam. Just talking it out and seeing how that makes you feel and seeing what kind of organic reaction you have to that is in itself upset.
Yeah.
At least it makes sense to me.
So this is a stamina question from Tim Ashby, and he said a lot of people ask about doing the work so quickly and deeply on a TV show, which I'd love you to talk about, but also how the hell do you keep up the endurance doing it week after week after week?
You just don't think so much. You just do it. It's an interesting thing, TV compared to say a film. You kind of have to know what world you're in, and because TV moves so fast, you don't really have the time to indulge in a moment, because they're trying to fit all these words within the span of the 40 minutes of airtime. So whatever moment you're going to have, which is why I say record yourself, shoot things, become aware of what editing looks like so you can learn how to either elongate a moment and fill it or abbreviate it for something like television. TV is exactly that. Film, you can kind of indulge in a moment, because I feel like film is more about human behavior, and there's a lot more time to explore. They'll give you months to kind of figure out what that is, because they're more interested in what it is that you're bringing to the table in terms of behavior. Film, not so much. They want accurate line readings. And if you can find little moments in there to kind of fill it in that space that they have, which is a very tight space, that's kind of what you have to do. But that's what I mean by you can't overthink that. You just kind of have to do it and just keep doing it until you get really good at that. It's a different muscle. Yes, everything is grounded in truth, but learning how to elongate a moment or shorten it for certain genres or styles or networks is kind of what helps me get through these long days, is kind of having an approach to how it is that I'm going to tackle this, if that makes sense.
And Chris, when you're moving, TV moves so quickly and you have to make these choices quickly. Do you ever have instances where you feel like, oh shit, I could have done that better, and you have to let it go?
Always, always, always. Everything, every scene I have, I always think I can do it better. Always. Anytime I'm overly confident is when I probably didn't get it. So, that's just the nature of it. Just the nature of being an artist. You're always striving for perfection, and you'll never attain it, but you can try and get close to whatever it is that you have in your mind. I try to let it go, and I've gotten better over the years about letting it go. But you still can't help but think about it. Weeks later, after I finished shooting, I'm walking my son down the street or something, and I'm still going over lines or moments that I could have done better. It's never ending. It's never ending. You're always in your head as an actor, kind of thinking and how could I have done it better and this and that. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I think that helps you strive to be better. If you're not settling, if you're saying to yourself, "Oh, I did that pretty good," kind of, there's not much else for me to do or grow or whatever, then you'll kind of plateau, and that's what you'll do. If that answered your question.
He asked another question, which I just think is the stamina. How do you keep up with it? And of course, you were staying with me for 2 weeks when you were doing the FBI, and I've known you many years, and the idea that you could get up at 4:00 in the morning to get on a subway, go to Brooklyn, and I kept thinking, he's going to get fired. He's going to get fired. I'm going to come out in the morning for coffee, and he's going to be still asleep on the sofa. How do you do that? Do you know? I mean, it's all the time. I mean, that was a 2 week.
I think people think of it as stamina, but I think of it as not getting fired, and that that's all there is to it. You got to get there because you don't want to get fired, and that's enough. That's pretty much it. That's the driving force. I don't want to get fired. Okay, let me show up on time. No, my lines don't bump into the furniture.
Oh, okay. Speaking of knowing your lines, this is a huge topic, which I of course think it's ridiculous. I see people having conversations about this on social media all the time about should you be off book in an audition, in a callback, in a self-tape. I always see that topic, and I'm like, that's not really the point. But like, what is there an answer?
I think that there is no answer. You just have to be good. They don't care. I've heard about people booking gigs who had no time to prepare, who literally had a second to record it within their car, and they found some way of doing it, and because they were good, they got it. And then other people were extremely off book, but sometimes it can come across as too rehearsed, and other times not well planned enough if you don't know it enough. So that's a tough question.
It is an interesting question. I think Margot Martindale is going to join us later in the summer, and I had a conversation with her about it, and she said, yes, I'm always off book for auditions. She said, because I want them to know I care. And I think her psychologically being off book lets them know that.
Okay, so here's what I think about it.
Because you always off book.
I think when you're looking down at a page, which they tell you is okay a lot of the time, I think that breaks focus, and I think that breaks the scene. And I think people want to see, as much as they say it's not a final product, we don't want to see a thing, they want to see a final product. They want to see you come in and absolutely kill it. Done. That's it. There's nothing else to it. So if I have time, I'll get off book. If I don't have time, I'll prop it up on a monitor and I'll read it. But the one thing I'm not doing is looking down to seal it off a page.
But then I'm sure you've...
Even if they don't know it, I want them to think I know it. Which is why sometimes if it's 11 pages the next day, which it was for FBI, I'm going to prop it up on a monitor and I'm going to fake it.
I'm sure you've heard Milton say that once you get off book, all creative work stops. So I guess I'm wondering, how do you reconcile that? How do you make sure that you're not setting a performance or jumping to a choice too quickly?
Yeah. I think,
That is an interesting question.
excuse me, I think that for me, my approach and way is obviously the more you do it, the better you get at not getting in your head and not getting stuck in certain ways. And what I mean by stuck is line readings that come across as too rehearsed. My approach now is okay. What are the two, maybe three different ways that this scene can be played, or some of the choices that I can alter, and that way I'm never married to something and over rehearsing something too much to where that's the only way I'm going to play it. And sometimes there actually is an only way that you can play it. You know, and just a matter of making that real. But ways I don't get stuck in making it feel too rehearsed, if that is the only way I'm going to play it, is okay, well, let me just not fully commit to marrying just one choice. What else can I offer up? And so I'll send my representation two or three different versions of it. And they're not completely different versions, but certain choices here and there. And just by keeping it loose and keeping it kind of different, helps me not get stuck in that way, if that makes sense.
I think also, I have to say, it really comes from doing it, doing it, doing it, doing it.
That's it. I mean,
I
there's
mean,
there's no cheat code.
yeah. I mean, seriously, once you get confident about doing it, you're not so uptight about getting it right.
That's why I say you gotta shoot
Mhm.
your own stuff, man. You gotta edit. You gotta write your own stuff. You gotta get used to, even if the world never sees it, even if it's just you and your friends creating stuff, recording it, and you're looking back on your work. Uh, that's the best way of doing it and getting that experience without actually having to go into a room and fail. Yes, you have to go into a room and fail 1,000 times. I did that. But what I wish I would have done earlier on was do these sketches that I do with my friend. That's what I wish I had done earlier on, even earlier on, as well as classes and all that, just playing in my own time.
That's a great transition to this question about what do you do day to day to work on your craft when you're not auditioning?
That's it. I mean, I don't do that anymore, but I'll take on favorite pieces of monologues that I absolutely love, that excite me to act, and I'll work on them. I'll work on them any chance I get. If I'm driving to train a client, if I'm taking my son for a walk, I'm working it out. And talking things out, doing the monologue because I love it. And you have to do it because you kind of love it. And if you're doing it for any other reason but that, it's gonna be a hard road.
I never understood that until recently. That whole idea of you're always working.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing to, well, because how am I always working if I'm not in class or anything like that? Well, you take on things that you love. That's how you do things that excite you, not because you have to and think you should be working on it, but you find material that you absolutely love and you just work on it, and it should be fun. That's it.
You always did enjoy it. I have to say, when you were what I think of as a kid, it wasn't that many years ago, and you still are a kid, but it's like you'd always find an empty rehearsal room, and everybody else had left the theater or left the school, and you'd be there once you figured out how to get out of the building after they closed it. It's like you'd find an empty room and work.
You know what I loved coming up with? I loved coming up with choices that not just excited me, but I couldn't wait to get to class and be like, oh, can't wait to see how people react to this choice. Oh, I can't wait.
I think that's when you know it's a good choice.
How do you know when it's a good choice?
No. I mean, I think that is when you know it's a
That's
good
when
choice.
you know it's a good choice.
Yes, everybody always asks that question. How do you know you have a good choice? And the only way you ever know that you have a good choice is when you go, oh, I can't wait to get to class and show them that.
Absolutely. If you're trying to get it right, you're going to fall into a lot of traps, and you're going to have that feeling like, oh, what didn't I do right? But everyone's trying to figure out how to do it right, which I think is the mistake. I think it's, finding a way that excites you. That's where those choices are. Yeah.
What I had a discussion. Well, I have started a discussion earlier today that with someone who said I have to end this relationship because the person that I'm in the relationship, I saw their work and their acting is terrible. But aside from that reason to end a relationship, but how much do you think you had to sacrifice, like a social, during the period where you were learning and putting this together?
I mean, you've heard every great actor say you work hard, and you when those who are sleeping, you're working. When those who are partying, you're working. I also personally, I mean, you can have that time to go and celebrate, or have that time to do whatever it is, but I always wanted to be really, really amazing and better than good. And I felt like a lot of people that were showing up, just kind of wanted to do the work. And I knew, because of you and because of other people, that if I wasn't always grinding and always working at it, that I wasn't going to feel confident and like I was making the best choices. So I would say I sacrificed a lot. I would say the 5 years that I went to the Stella Adler and studied with you, I seldom went out. Seldom. I went out in other ways. I had small groups of friends, but in terms of partying, if that's what you mean, I never partied. I didn't like to party. I got that out of my system when I was 18.
So at that time, what would you say were your biggest actor problems, challenges that there's just so much unsolicited advice these days. So anyone starting out, and some of it comes directly from teachers and coaches and casting directors. And then a lot of it is indirect because it comes out of the media from stars who are trying to talk about their process and all of this, controversy about the method. So what was like the biggest, I don't know, challenge, confusion, misconception that you had to overcome when you were first building your process and figuring out what worked for you and what didn't?
I would say I had every problem under the book. Milton won't remember this, but I literally went through all of it. All kinds of bad habits. Bad habits are what you're talking about, right? What kind of things did I have to overcome?
Yeah.
In terms of just about myself, to kind of break and mold myself into the kind of actor I wanted to be. Like I said, I would act with my mouth open. I needed to become aware of that. I would have eye twitches. I would have lip spasms because I was so nervous. I would be trying to wonder what to do with my hands. Do I put them in my pocket? Do I put them in my, that's a hard thing to figure out too. What do I do when I'm on a stage? What do I do when I'm in front of the camera? Do I look at the person? Where's my eye line? And every problem that an actor has, I went through. And you just have to kind of just keep doing it, keep discovering, and keep recording yourself and figuring out who you are, and figure out what the camera sees and how other people respond to your choices if you're working on the stage, and if that moves people. And that's kind of how you get over that. You know,
I guess what I'm
and more importantly, surround yourself around people who know what they're talking about, because it's very easy to get lost and surround yourself around people who are feeding you shit. So I think that's the hardest part to navigate, because if you surround yourself around a group who doesn't really care or is steering you in the wrong direction, you're going to fall prey to prolonging a lot of these bad habits and bad choices.
Yeah, like when I think of when I started, I didn't have a process until I was 40. I went back to class, with Milton. So, I mean, everything, jumping to a performance, the sort of that impulse, that need to perform, or what was another issue? Making choices so quickly, answering questions so quickly, not allowing myself to sit in sort of the discomfort and the silence and of I don't know, and really trying to figure out what is at the essence of an idea.
Yeah. I think a lot of that comes from exams and tests we took as kids, and trying to get those answers right. Very analytical approach to things. I know I certainly had that. It was like, well, I did the assignment today. I did it in class, and I felt, I was right. I did it right, didn't I? It's such a hard thing to just kind of understand that it's an art form, and that you're learning a technique, which isn't a right answer.
I'm going to get back to something also that Walker brought up. When I say, and it's not just me, Stanislavski said it also, as soon as you go to the text, all your creative impulses stop. But of course, he was talking about rehearsing plays, and in the best of all possible worlds, you layer in slowly. I know this much today. I'm going to play with that. Then I know a little bit more, and I'm going to play with that. And I'm not going to leap to a performance. First of all, I have to say, in television, it's not like you're dealing with great text.
Yeah.
So going to the text when you know you're moving the plot forward, I think is different. But I think one of the things that you do, which you used to tell me when in an audition, that you loved live auditions because a lot of people didn't want to hear other people audition. You loved hearing other people audition. And it's because every time you'd hear somebody yell on a line because it said, the line was, "How dare you?" And every single actor that went in to audition would go, "How dare you?" And so you already knew in advance that when you went in, you were just going to look very quietly and go.
Yeah, I was a bit of a cocky son of a bitch when I first started.
Yes, but I also think, I think the value of doing it is you get confident enough to try things.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think there's nothing that can replace that. I mean, it is like sports. It is, you can go out and hit the backhand and hit the backhand and hit the backhand, but I mean, the more you do it, then one day you can hit a backhand. And I think that's really it. You develop the ability, so it's not so mind-boggling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true. I think you also develop good choices by watching other people make good choices. You have to have a sense of what good choices look like, don't you?
Yeah.
You have to go see those good plays. You have to go identify who the great actors are that to you, and see what kind of choices they're making that stop you in your tracks, or stop you from
and also it's yeah, but also it is telling you can't be an audience. You have to be an actor. An actor watching a performance is different than an audience watching a performance.
Yeah, I certainly don't watch movies the way I used to. I mean, I watch them for performances and
what they're doing.
micro expressions and what is going on with them internally. And yes, I follow the plot and all that, but that's definitely what I'm kind of more focused on than anything else. And,
By the way, Deb,
I have a strange habit of repeating lines after any actor has said them. My wife pointed this out to me the other day. We were watching Succession, and some actor said a line, and then I found myself kind of repeating that line to see how it would come out of my mouth. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm just acting."
it's like you're doing Meisner. You're doing Meisner with the TV.
I couldn't help it. I feel like I could do a better line reading than that.
I can't believe you do that. That's hilarious.
I couldn't help it.
Deb Margolin chimed in. Make bold choices in all caps.
Yeah, make bold choices.
Amen.
Yeah,
and John Arnone's question was, how do you ask a question? And I said, you can type it here. So Tim Ashby asks, what's a performance you think everyone should watch and study? Where you're not doing your own line readings.
You're not doing your own line readings. I mean, there's so many. It's hard to name one. I mean, you could practically see Streep in anything. You could practically see Daniel Day-Lewis in everything. You could
Brando.
Any of those great actors. Brando. There's so many great performances, and everybody has their own favorites. So it's really hard to. I mean, I could name my own favorites, but that's something else. I don't know.
Well, who are your favorites?
I mean, I like Daniel Day-Lewis in Phantom Thread. It's not a very popular movie, but love what he was doing in that. I love looking up behind the scenes improvisation footages of. There's one of Brando in a 5-minute. The same scene 3 different ways with opposite Robert De Niro, and you see how he spins it different ways and makes different choices, and you can find it. Brando improvises with Robert De Niro and things like that, and you get to see a master at work and see how he finds these different choices just like that, But again, 10,000 hours. You do it, and you know what good choices are, and you're able to kind of make them on the fly and adjust on the fly.
This is interesting. Do you have any roles or genres that you have different understanding of since you started, or roles that you didn't see yourself wanting to play that now you might like to play?
It's an interesting question. Yeah, I think as I've begun to discover more of who I am and how I fit into the world, and being a father and an actor and a personal trainer, and seeing what kind of roles I've kind of done so far, I am less interested in the in fact, I'm able to identify more of what I can't play, how the world doesn't see me, which is a drug addict. These kinds of really messed up characters for the world of film and TV. People just don't see me as that, and I think the misconception I had of myself when I first started, or the first couple of years, is I can play anything. Because you're doing theater, you're taking on all these different characters, and you convince yourself, well, I can do anything. But you just, and you maybe in your ability you can, but I think an answer to the question, short and simple, is wanting to play characters that fit my mold a little more, as opposed to these characters that I was doing early on, or thought I could do early on, which were these drug addict, really messed up psychologically. Although they're fun, it's not something I'm going to get cast as. I'm more interested in doing parts I'm going to get cast in.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm not so interested in that anymore. Oh, and I've done those. I've done those on film. But I think I kind of have gotten that out of my system, and I'm more interested in exploring characters I can really play in the world and in how other people can see me.
Well, at the same time, I have to say, last week you played a gullible Mormon, not Mormon, Muslim, who was in the FBI.
Oh, the gullible character was in The Rookie. The FBI character was the devout Muslim.
Yes, was a devout Muslim. And then that was 2 weeks ago. And then last week you were on NCIS when you played a Russian thug.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, it's still, despite, you know, there are things that you no longer think I can play anything. I want to play that. But there still are things that you say.
But that's what I mean, though. I mean these kind of characters that are more my mold. My mold isn't the extremely sexy leading man Chris Hemsworth part. My mold is bad boy, a character actor, you know, maybe a bit of the boy next door, tortured soul kind of thing. But they're not, you know, some of these other characters that I know I'm not perceived as, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? If that doesn't make sense, I can elaborate, but I think I made sense on that.
But I still think it's fun that you love going in for things they don't think you're right for.
Oh, no. I think so too. They're fun parts. They're fun parts. Yeah.
John Arnone wants to know, how do you incorporate the technology of TV and film equipment, lights, booms, into a sense of the space that your character is inhabiting and how that informs the character?
What exactly is the question?
How do you incorporate it? I can't remember who asked. Somebody asked a question like this, or maybe Milton, you talked about somebody who said they invite it in or they invite the camera. Well, who said that, Milton?
Oh, yes. Oh, that actress I love.
Right.
But I think what I think it's trying to figure out how with all the technology do you still live truthfully in the circumstance of the play?
Oh, it was Ruffalo. It was the conversation you had with Mark Ruffalo, where it's about you're not blocking out the reality of that there's a camera right there. You somehow integrated or incorporated into the reality of the circumstance somehow. I guess that it's a kind of, you know, it's getting back to that kind of technical area, but
yeah. I mean, for me, it was just a matter of recording myself and figuring out where the camera goes and how that makes my face look and what I'm doing, and knowing what frame allows my limitations in play. You know, I can't make these big movements if it's a super tight close-up. So I think doing it and being familiar with your frame, how that makes you look, your surrounding, I think is a good way of inviting the camera in, and knowing how to adjust your already good, truthful choices and your relationship to your partner by just being aware of, okay, my frame, I'm tight, I can't exactly do a whole lot, but I can communicate what I'm trying to communicate by doing this.
I think you're
the wide shot, you know, what opportunities can I create in this wide shot that might either stand out or because you know it's a second or not a second, but just no, being able to assimilate to whatever the shot is. You know, if it's a wide shot, maybe you can do something a little bit more with your body. If it's a tight shot, you know, you can't do too much. It's as simple as that, I think.
But also, I think I think what you said, it has a lot to do with the fact that you truthfully are playing something. I mean, I always think that if an actor is living truthfully in the circumstance of the play, and if you and they've been and they know it, then you can say, instead of doing it over, if I'm doing a play, instead of doing it over on the sofa, what do you think about doing it over by the window? And it doesn't throw you.
Yeah.
Because you own all of it. So I have a feeling that similarly, if you own everything that you're doing, that somebody says, "Oh, it's now a close up." No, don't move. Own all of it, but don't move at all. That
Right.
So with all of with all of that, I think it still goes back to if you know.
Yeah, if you know what's going on,
Yeah.
it will in turn affect how you deal with it. And then making those adjustments isn't so difficult. You can, however you say, let the camera in. Or because you know what's going on and they ask you to say, a little more still, you're able to figure out why they want me to be still as opposed to just being still. You know what I'm saying? You have to figure out all these things in a split second if you don't have time, if you're on set. What is it that makes me still as opposed to just being still? Okay, well, maybe I'm still because I'm taking in this information and I'm letting it boil underneath me because I know in a second I'm about to blow on this, motherfucker or whatever it is. And just kind of talking out is what helps me be still as opposed to they told me to be still. They told me to be still,
So you're still, but you still have something going on.
That's what helps you feel those moments even when you are still. Yeah.
So we've got about 4-ish minutes. But from Carson, when you were first starting out, what concept of Milton's helped you the most?
Talking out.
Mm-hmm.
Talking out led me to everything. Anytime I was confused or lost, I'd talk out and eventually I'd find it. It's the same thing when I wrote briefly. I was writing a movie and I used my actor talking out to help me through certain blocks that I had. Research. Anything that helps you ignite something. Whether it's research on YouTube or research from a book or whatever it is, something that helps ignite something is, I think, the biggest thing that affected me.
We were living together for a while, 4.5 years, and I used to hear him talking out in his room all the time. In the middle of the night, I'd get up to go to the bathroom and hear him talking out. And on one occasion, he decided to leave a manager. This happened many times in his career, and so he decided he would call the manager himself and take care of it. This was like a growing moment in his career when I wasn't going to do it for him, the parent. He was going to do it for himself. And so he went to the bedroom and he talked out what he was going to say to the manager, leaving. And it was like the talking out. I mean, to me, the purpose of talking out is to get the experience of what you know factually and to talk yourself into the frame of mind that allows you to play the action that you needed to play, which is this is over.
Yeah.
But you needed to talk it out so that you got it.
Yeah. It was all kinds of, I would grab at anything I could because every character is different. Sometimes talking certain characters out didn't give me as much as if it was because I couldn't break past certain dialogue barriers that I had stuck in my head in terms of memorization. Yes, I would talk it out sometimes. Sometimes I'd write the dialogue down with no punctuation because that would help me. Maybe sometimes I was too fixated on how to say the line. I couldn't break out of it. I'd write it down with no punctuation. Other times, I've heard of actors doing the first letter, writing down the first letter of each word as cues to what the rest of the sentence is. That's never made sense to me, but I know actors that do that. And so it's just a matter of each and every part that you work on is different, and finding roads in. And it may not ever be the same road in, but talking out certainly helped me a lot early on. A lot. Yeah. I'd say if I haven't made this clear for any actors who are just kind of starting out, want some more tips and advice, invest in a good camera. If you have a savings or something like that, I ended up buying a $3,000 camera that my wife uses for photography, but I use for my self-tape. I used to shoot those sketches that we used to shoot, and then I'd learn the editing program, and I bought a little boom shotgun mic, and you just kind of have to be a filmmaker, not just an actor, to figure out film. Get a good backdrop, record yourself doing self-tapes, record even if you're not sending them to anybody. You just have to really I can't emphasize this enough, you have to just do something every day to really get a sense of your instrument. You got to learn how to play your instrument.
Also, this just came up, and I'll throw this in before we go. I realized this week, because I hired an actor. I'm directing a play, and I needed an actor, and this has happened twice with this play.
Yeah,
is that he had something on tape. And one of the actors I hired had this, and it was like a terrible camera. I don't know, maybe his mother shot it from an iPhone, a play that he'd done at the Roundabout Theater, but I could see his work. And it hit me that any work, I mean, people are looking, if somebody sees you and they like you, or somebody says you should see this actor, any work you do is good. I mean, if it's exactly what you're saying, if you have yourself, on a self-tape and you put it on your own website, I mean, God knows.
You can't wait for an opportunity to act. You can't say, well, my agents or anything aren't sending me out, I can't act, I can't do it. You can. And there are 1,000 short films and student films out there that you can do to compile footage for a reel that you can then send to get representation, to do all of that and just get better. I feel like we got too many excuses as actors. This and that and you just have to find a way to keep acting. And then you get into the mentality of when a big movie presents itself, when a big opportunity presents itself, you aren't caught up in the moment because you treat it like every other short film or student film, and it's not a big deal. I think that was a big misconception early on. Is I'll be like, this is my chance, this is my big break, man. If I could just get this thing, it's gonna put me on the mat in a big way. You just gotta do all of that so you're not so nervous. And you do have to get in the mentality of, why would I want to work with these filmmakers if they don't want to work with me? It's another short film, student film. These are things I would tell myself as I began to develop more experience, instead of, I don't belong here. This is too big. It's for Steven Spielberg. Yeah, it's big, but you just have to get experience, and that's the bottom line.
That's great advice. I mean, God, the mentality going into these things is so important.
Yeah, it's more a mental game than it is anything else. I mean, of course, it's not getting in your head, not psyching yourself out. It's such a challenge with these huge opportunities because, veterans who've been doing it for 20, 30 years, we all get nervous. We all get nervous. But you can learn how to channel those nerves to your benefit. You just got to keep doing it.
Well, great. Thank you, Chris, for our first conversations on acting.
Yeah,
Um,
my pleasure.
yes, this was fun. You'll be interested to know that we couldn't come up with a title for a while. For a while, we were going to call it Chattin' Actin', but we. Anyway, thank you. God, this was fun.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Yeah,
Do it
this
again.
was terrific. This was kind of what we hoped would happen when we start having conversations about acting with actors who are not movie stars, but like part of
Right.
being on the journey.
Yeah. It's really what it is. It's one big journey, and never thinking that you're one job away, which I think is the mistake. It's just one big long career. You just got to keep stacking them credits.
Great, excellent.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thank you.
All right.
If you missed any of this, we will post the recording of it soon
On our website.
on our website. And
Another thing Walker put together, I don't need an acting class.com. So
Follow him.
right. All right. Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
How do we leave, Walker? Do we
you just
Button on the right that says leave.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Leave.
All right, y'all. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
Chris.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, leave.